StrayAllDay.com.
Now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques all underneath the umbrella of one unified philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is, we are on part 2 of our what will be a 4-part series, the most common logical fallacies. Again, you want to watch out for these, make sure people are not using them against you and baiting you into conversations that you don't even need to be having because they're sending you in a direction that things weren't even supposed to go. But before we get into that, I'll remind you all of 2 things. First of all, my daily motivation and Monday motivation messages guaranteed to have you focused, sharp, and on point to start your day or your week, respectively. All you got to do is be a member of my texting community. It is free to join. My number is 305-384-6894, and it is down below in the description. Secondly, Work on Your Game University. You are serious about taking your game to the next level, to the level that it needs to be at, and getting all your shit together on a personal level and a professional level, and you would like me to coach you along the way in doing so. And I mean, why wouldn't you? Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com, link down below in the description. That out the way, let's pick up right where we left off at point number 4, the most common logical fallacies. If you didn't hear the introduction where I explain logical fallacies, what they are, where they come from, listen to the previous episode of this show. Number 4 is the false binary. What is a false binary? It means presenting 2 options as if they are the only 2 possibilities when there are indeed many other possibilities. Back in the day, for example, there used to be a TV show called The People's Court. And the judge in The People's Court was a guy named Judge Wapner. And once he was doing, I saw this on the show, he was doing an episode where he had some high school kids come in and just ask him questions about his work. And one of the kids said, anytime you have 2 people in your court, and People's Court was like a small claims court between 2 people just arguing over like $300 or something like that. So, and the kid said, anytime you have 2 people arguing in your court, Judge, it is obvious that one of them is telling the truth and one of them is lying. So how do you deal with that? And Judge Wapner's response was that the question was a false question. He didn't say that. He says it's not true. Sometimes people just have different interpretations of the same event. It doesn't necessarily mean that one side is telling the truth and one side is lying every time that people come to court. Sometimes people just have different ways of looking at the exact same situation. It's also known as seeing 2 different movies on the same screen. So what that kid had produced when he asked the question was an example of a false binary. Judge Wapner did not label it such, but that's exactly what it was, because the kid was falsely claiming that there are only 2 possibilities anytime someone comes to court to argue a case, that they're either telling the truth or that they're lying, when the reality is there's a whole lot of gray area in between the truth and a complete falsehood. Some people may just see things, again, as I said, see things a little bit differently. Now, a false binary can be actually a powerful tool when used the right way. And actually, it can be a powerful tool depending on who you're talking to and why you're talking to them. So, for example, in sales, a false binary is actually a good idea because you can ask a customer, hey, do you want to pay for this car in full or do you want to go the financing route? Now, notice that no matter which option they choose, you made a sale. So if they choose to buy the whole car in full or they choose to take financing, either way, you made a sale that day because you're only giving them 2 options. Doesn't mean they're going to take one of them. But you want to, if you present it that way, usually people do. They take an option based on what's presented to them if you have built rapport and displayed enough authority with that person. It goes right back to our previous point, the appeal to authority. So the appeal to authority also, just as well as the false binary, these can be used in powerful, positive ways when used the right way. And when you have authority, that authority matters because authority causes people to find you on Google, causes people to seek you out, causes people to want to buy your products and services just because of who you are as a person. And again, if you have something good to offer them, there's no negative side to this. But you have to be careful when people are using it against you. So you should use it, but not let it get used against you. False binary, again, can work very well in, as I said, selling, for example. You got to be careful when people use the false binary against you, however, in everyday conversation. So, for example, if you hear that there's a girl out there who wants to become a boy, which is not even a thing, but let's just say that there are people out there who believe that, we know that, or a boy becoming a girl, then, and you say to somebody, hey, I'm not okay with a girl turning into a boy or a boy turning into a girl. I do not believe that transgenderism is even a thing. And a person could say back to me, well, Dre, then that means since kids who aren't allowed to be who they really want to be, they end up taking their own lives, you're okay with kids taking their own lives because you don't believe that a boy can become a girl and a girl can become a boy. See, that's a false binary because they're only giving me two options. They say either agree with this or you agree that kids should take their own lives. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I don't agree with that thing. However, that doesn't mean that the only other option is all the way over here at the other end of the spectrum, which is kids taking their own lives. See, that's the false binary. And you have to be careful of these because often the false binaries will also include appeals to emotion, which is what you just heard. The appeal to emotion is also known as the emotional blackmail, which is, oh, so if you don't agree with this thing over here, that sounds pretty simple, then I mean you must agree with this terrible, negative, emotional thing over here, which sounds really bad. And people will put you in what we call putting people in a fork, which means no matter which option you pick, it goes bad for you. And it goes bad for you because you end up either agreeing with something that you don't agree with, or you are agreeing with something that makes you look emotionally bad, even though it's just completely made up nonsense. So you got to be very careful of this because they're mixing two fallacies in here together: the appeal to emotion, also the false binary. And again, when you're talking to people who are really good with words and people who have been arguing about certain topics forever and maybe even do it for a living, they will run circles around you verbally if you do not catch these fallacies when they throw them out there. And often they will stack them on top of each other to the point that you had to deconstruct everything that they said to get to it. So again, this is why you got to slow down when you're talking to these folks, because they will speed up the conversation as much as they can to basically walk all over you verbally if you are not skilled at catching this stuff. So these things are used for mental and emotional manipulation. If you've been paying attention to things happening socially these days, things that involve gender, that involve race, that involve anything around women and feminism, you'll often hear a whole lot of mental and emotional manipulation happening through words using false binaries. Either you agree with this or you're about this. Either you agree with what we believe over here, or that means you're this terrible person because you're okay with that thing happening over there. Those are false binaries. You must be very, very wary of these. People use them all the time. Point number 5. Today's topic, once again, is the most common logical fallacies. Number 5 is the slippery slope fallacy. Slippery slope fallacy is arguing that one small step will lead to an inevitable and extreme outcome. That's a slippery slope fallacy. So, for example, President Joe Biden, as of this recording, he is technically still the president. I don't think he's doing any work as the president, but he is technically the president as of this recording. Probably by the time you hear this, he'll still be president. He's president until January of 2025. So in the winter of 2021, the White House put out a statement that anyone who did not go get the jab, the V word, there was going to be a long winter of severe illness and death. The White House put this statement out in the winter of 2021. They did literally say this. My question for you is, how did that winter turn out? That winter of 2021. I'm not saying nobody died, but people die all the time. And it was a slippery slope fallacy. So if you don't go get the jab, that means it's going to be a long winter of illness and death for you. All right, that didn't happen. I don't have the jab, and there was no illness, there was no death. People use the slippery slope fallacy often to warn you that if you take one small step in a certain direction, then it must mean you're going to take all the steps in that direction. And that may be a direction that you don't want to go in. Right? So it's just going to lead to some terrible calamity if you just take this one step in this direction. So if you just eat that one piece of bacon, then before you know it, you're going to abandon your whole plant-based diet and you'll be eating meat all day, every day. All right, that's a slippery slope fallacy. If you're a black person and you decided that you wanted to vote for Donald Trump for president, then that means you are going on the slippery slope of eventually being back in chains and becoming a slave all over again. If you don't take all the drugs that the doctor says that you should take, then that must mean you are on your way to dying. If you don't go and take your kid to the doctor and get all the shots that the doctor says you're supposed to take, then your kid's not going to be healthy and they might die before they reach adulthood. These are all examples of the slippery slope fallacy. And again, they're all used to mentally and emotionally manipulate you. And they are common because, frankly, they work. You take one step in this direction, then you can take another, then another, then another, and before you know it, it's all over. The reason that the slippery slope fallacy works so effectively is because human beings are pretty good at projecting, especially projecting the future of behaviors. So I remember years ago, this girl was asking me to take her to the gym and show her how to do some exercises on the machines because she wasn't very familiar with fitness equipment. I said that I would, and she said, well, Dre, before we do that, let me remind you or warn you that I don't want to be like one of those big gym girls with all the muscles and they look like a man because they're all muscular and stuff. And this is a female who had not done any weight training, any exercise work ever on a consistent basis in her entire life. She was worried about having too many muscles. And I said, how about you worry about just going to the gym 2 days in a row before you worry about having too many muscles? What she was projecting was a slippery slope fallacy. Or if I go to the gym and lift weights, I'm going to look like one of those gym girls with too many muscles. Like, bitch, you haven't lifted weights 2 days in a row ever in your life. You're not going to have too many muscles. All right, how about you get one muscle first before you worry about you having too many? All right, that's a slippery slope fallacy. So be careful of these because, again, human beings, we tend to do these to ourselves. All right, as soon as we take one step in a direction, we start projecting the future that we're just going to take a million steps in that same direction just because we took one. And sometimes we can do this in a positive way. Hey, I just did one thing. I just sold one client. I just got one customer. Maybe I can get a million customers. That's a positive way of thinking. But then it also can happen in a negative way. Hey, I just went a whole day and didn't make any sales. I might never make a sale again for the next 10,000 days of my career. That's a negative way of looking at it. So you got to be careful of this and keep it under control because it will railroad you completely out of your mind. And if you had another person use it against you, they will railroad you out of your mind. Moving on to point number 6. Today's topic, once again, is the most common logical fallacies. I'm listing them out in a 4-part series. Number 6, the hasty generalization. Hasty generalization. This means drawing a conclusion based on insufficient evidence. So the slippery slope fallacy is a form of a hasty generalization. You're taking a little bit of information and drawing a full conclusion off this little bit of information that we have. You don't know enough to draw that conclusion, but you're going to draw it anyway because you know this a little bit. An example would be, let's say my friend gets a virus and they die. My friend got a virus and they die. So then the hasty generalization would be anybody who gets a virus is going to die. Well, we don't have enough information to draw that conclusion because I didn't say my friend died from the virus. I just said they got the virus and they died. I didn't say the virus killed them. They died with the virus, not because of the virus. So you don't have enough information to draw any conclusions from this. We can't draw any conclusions about the virus because we don't know what the virus was. We don't know what comorbidities my friend may have had before they died. And we don't know if the virus had any role in it at all, if anything. This is another hasty generalization that was used against you during the scamdemic several years ago. Many of you may not even know this, but let me tell you or inform you or remind you, if you did know it, that hospitals were incentivized financially to report as many COVID deaths and infections as possible. They were incentivized to do this because it was all part of a big psyop being used against the general public to make people think that the virus was worse than it was. So what was happening was, if you were to have, during COVID, let's say in the fall of 2020, you got into a car accident and died. You got in a car accident. You died in the car accident. They would take your body to the hospital and they would give you a COVID test. They would give your dead body a COVID test. And yes, this was really happening. I am not making this up. They would give your dead cadaver a COVID test. And if your corpse returned a positive for COVID, your death would get marked as a COVID death. No, I'm not joking. Yes, they were doing this. So those numbers that you heard about, how many people, quote unquote, died from COVID? No, they didn't die from COVID. They died and they happened to have COVID. It's not COVID that killed them. I'll give you another example. My mother's father, who I did not have a relationship with, and my mom didn't even have a relationship with him. I remember my mom, I'm recollecting correctly, my mom's dad, who technically is my grandfather, he left the family. My mom has 3 brothers, so it was 4 kids, husband and wife. He left their family when my mom was like maybe 12 years old, something around that age bracket. And he was never around the family anymore after that. My mom grew up with a stepfather who I did know. He passed away many years ago. And anyway, this guy, my mom's dad, and that's why I call him this guy. I don't call him he is technically my grandfather, but I had no relationship with this guy. He passed away during the COVID summer, probably the summer of 2020, around that time period. He passed away. And I remember my sister, she got on social media and I saw her post this. This is before she blocked me on social media. At the last I checked, she still had me blocked on social media. But when she didn't have me blocked, I saw her post this. She posted, my grandfather died of COVID, which was complete bullshit. He did not die of COVID. Now, let me tell you how I know he didn't die of COVID. I saw my grandfather, my mom's dad, at a family function about 3 years before he died. And at that family function, this man could barely walk. He could not turn his head to the left or to the right. So when he was sitting at the table and he said something to me, I was sitting to his left, about 3 seats to his left. His eyes moved to the left, but he could not turn his head to actually look at me. So he's looking at me with his eyes, like to the side of his face because he couldn't turn his head. I was talking back to him. He couldn't turn his head because his body was already beat up. He could not go to the bathroom by himself. He could not stand up by himself, and he couldn't sit down by himself. He was already beat up. Now, why is this? Because he had several comorbidities. He had a stroke many years earlier and probably had a whole bunch of other things going on, which is why by the year 2020 he died. He was already on the edge of the casket when I saw him in 2017. I mean, that may sound crass, but that's what it is. He was already at the edge of the casket. The guy was damn near dead by that point. In 2017, he just hung on for 3 more years. And that's just the reality of the situation. So then he got COVID and he ended up dying. And then the story is, I remember I was even talking to my father about this, who was continuing to perpetuate the bullshit. He was like, hey, your grandfather or your mom's dad, he died of COVID. I said, he didn't die of COVID. And I said to my dad, you were at the same function I was at in 2017. Did you see him then? Wasn't he already damn near dead? I mean, I didn't say it in so many words, but pretty close. But my dad wanted to push the COVID thing because, again, a lot of people were easily psyoped by this appeal to authority. He didn't die of COVID. He died with COVID. But is COVID the reason he died? No, that mofo was going to die anyway. All right, that's just what it is. He was going to die anyway. He was already damn near dead when I saw him in 2017. This is a hasty generalization. Oh, he died of COVID. See, the hasty generalization is often mixed, again, with appeals to authority and slippery slopes and appeals to emotion. So you see how people can stack these logical fallacies on top of each other? You got to be able to catch these so you can call people on their bullshit, or at least you can identify people's bullshit and know that you don't need to engage with them because they're saying a bunch of bullshit. So we know that these things are, again, not true, but when you hear people wholeheartedly believing in hasty generalizations, and you hear so many people saying the same thing, especially when it is coated with emotion, it's very hard to push back against it. But again, that's the reason why these are called logical fallacies, not emotional fallacies, logical fallacies. That's why you have to let your logic drive the car and let your emotions work the gas pedal, and you control the gas pedal. All right, so it's very common these days, and with the advent and popularization of social media, people tend to prioritize being the first to talk about a thing or being the most popular talking about a thing rather than being accurate in talking about a thing. How many times have you gone on the internet and saw something really popular, a really popular piece of content that was based on some bullshit? It wasn't even true what was being said, but because it was the first out or it was popular, a lot of people were perpetuating the nonsense. Okay, so we know, and you should know, anytime news breaks, the first people to throw anything out there are often inaccurate because they don't have enough information from which to draw conclusions. But because the journalistic world, and I'm being very generous when I say journalism, because journalism is pretty much dead these days, they are incentivized. These people are incentivized to get popular on social media. What works on social media? Does the truth work on social media? Do facts go viral on social media? No. What goes viral on social media is things that are entertaining, emotionalizing, and shareable. Anything that's entertaining, emotionalizing, and shareable goes viral on social media. Nothing about that says anything about it being true, accurate, or factual. And your favorite journalists, those are the people whose job it is to interpret the news and tell you what's really happening. They are incentivized to be popular in a place where facts do not matter. So this is why you got to be careful of the information that you're taking in, who you're getting it from, and why you choose to believe it. And again, as we go further into this, I brought up appeal to emotion. So I'm looking through my notes here and seeing if I even have appeal to emotion in here. Yes, I do have it in there. It'll be in a couple days. We will talk about it. Make sure I got it in my list. So let me recap today's class. This is part 2 of our ongoing 4-part series, the most common logical fallacies. Number 4, the false binary. This is when someone presents you 2 options as if those are the only 2 options when there are actually a bunch of options in between the 2. Usually they're at opposite ends of the spectrum, the 2 options you're presented. Number 5, the slippery slope. Arguing that one small step will lead to an inevitable and extreme outcome. And this is easy to work on people because we are pretty good at projecting one step that did happen and projecting the next 30 steps could happen, even though it didn't happen. It's like you meet a pretty girl at the mall and she's interested in you, and you start predicting and imaging what it look like when you 2 have kids. And she might not even like you that. She might not give you the wrong number, but you're already making a slippery slope fallacy. Number 6, hasty generalization. Drawing a conclusion based on insufficient evidence. And people do this all the time because people want to be first. People want to have breaking news. People want to be the first ones to tell their friends about stuff. And even the people whose job it is to tell us what's actually happening are incentivized to jump out on social media where being emotionalized, shareable, and first usually are the things that drive things the most. Has nothing to do with facts or accuracy. So you have to be very careful about from whom you get your information these days. All that said, tomorrow we'll get into the next part of the series. Make sure you go to workonyourgameuniversity.com so you can be an authority. You can help people with a binary option. Either one is going to help them get their game to the next level. At Work on Your Game University, we got some binary options for you. Either way, we're going to take your game from where it is to where it's going to be. You're going to be working with me directly. There's no binary on that. That's absolutely happening. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre,